Hello again. Continuing the theme of a time for reflection and moving forward and working out plans for the next season, I thought I'd use a real example of somebody that I've been working with for nearly a year now. So we've got a reasonable history together. I work with most people for longer than that, and we build up a very strong relationship. But this is a really good example because I've just done the periodization plan for this athlete moving into next year. And it's also quite relevant because I know a lot of you work towards ultra endurance type goals. He wants to do an ultra endurance event in the middle of the year, but he also wants to enjoy some shorter events earlier in the year and then also get back into doing some shorter events after the ultra endurance event. And perhaps one of the most important things I want to bring out is that rather than have lots of New Year resolutions and try and change everything, the best thing to do is look back over the previous year or previous years, as much history as you can gather, and learn from that and learn what works and what doesn't work. Look for the gaps in what you might not have done as effectively as possible in previous years. But rather than say, right, I'm going to do this instead of that sort of thing, it's better to say, well, how can I modify the things that did work to fill in the gaps and address the areas that were weaknesses, the things that didn't work quite so well. Or where are the weaknesses? How am I going to address them? But address them in a way that uses the historical information of things that went really well. So we've got a framework of events that are coming up. There's a bit of variability. We're not sure exactly what's going to happen. The calendars aren't all out, or he's not perused all the details of all the calendars. But we know when the ultra event is. We know roughly what he wants to do before that and roughly what he wants to do after that. And we've got the performance data from last year, what was working well and what wasn't working well, and where we want to go from that. So the ultra events in June, you can see from the periodization plan what we're planning to work on. And the reason we've come to that conclusions of the main things to work on is based on historical data that we know works for him. Over the years, I've looked at the last, all the data that he's got in Training Peaks or Strava and things like that, and reviewed that using artificial intelligence tools and also visual tools and analytical tools like WKO5 and Training Peaks, and of course discussing the things with him. And so I could see when he was performing at his best, look for correlations that resulted in those good performances, what are the things that led to those good performances as far as we can tell, and then look at last year and see what things he did that worked well, and also what things he did that perhaps impeded progress. And we can try and make less of those mistakes and do more of the things that work. His goal is to complete the ultra distance event with a good performance, a good solid performance, but not to have to dig so deep that he's really, it takes him months to recover from it. He wants to enjoy it in whatever way you can enjoy these events, and have a good performance. Last year he was in the top 20 in the ultra event he did, and he'll hope to do maybe something similar if he can ride in a similar way. He's got years and years of history in cycling, so he can do long rides and he can ride back-to-back days. Getting back on the bike day after day is not a problem. Obviously, if he can go a bit faster, he'll finish faster and perform better, and if we can make that happen, then great. But his main focus is to do well in the shorter events earlier in the season, before the big event, and also later in the season where he's got some bigger races coming up and he wants to do one in those if he can recover quickly enough. And what we found from his historical data is he had a much higher 5-minute and 3-minute power relative to his FTP. So the important thing is it's not the fact that he had a higher power, because he had a higher FTP and a higher 3 to 5 minute power, but the relationship was different in that he was more explosive. He could sustain a higher power at around his VO2 max, and therefore it seems that likely that there's some margin to be had there by working on that area. And that's how we started working together last year, a focus on 3 to 5 minute power. It worked really well, got him in good shape, and he had some good performances before the ultra event. He didn't recover quite as quickly as he might have hoped, but it was surprising how well he did recover and how well he performed later in the season. So you're going to use a similar model to that this year, but capitalise on things a bit better, do things a bit better, and build on the fitness. He's in much better shape now than he was when we started working together. So the likelihood is that the performances will be better. So going back to the periodization, he likes doing cyclocross, so that's a really good way of building winter fitness, having a bit of fun, adding a bit of interest. And if you don't like cyclocross, then things like Zwift races, virtual racing can be really good. The focus is on performing as best as possible in the events that are current. So cyclocross, high anaerobic requirement, is sort of on-off a lot of the time, requires some skills. It requires a sustainable effort, so reasonably high FTP is important. So the focus has been on VO2 max and anaerobic capacity with some endurance training at the weekends. And then as we progress away from the cyclocross season, probably do some virtual racing and focus more on the VO2 max and the FTP, because the longer races, longer events are going to be taking him like 2 to 3 hours. And as a consequence, having some sustained endurance fitness is going to be important. So we can't just focus on the 3 to 5 minute powers. We've got to have some FTP element in it and some longer training sessions in the mix. But of course we need longer training sessions to do the ultra endurance event. So there'll be a weekly long ride, but the weekly long ride won't be super long. It might be 3 to 4 hours or something like that. And then sporadically we'll have longer 200 to 400 kilometre rides. Maybe just one 400, that's all that we did last year, and that seemed to be good enough. So sporadic, longer rides in gaps in the season where there's enough time to recover, perhaps before a business trip or something like that. And that's the other element that we have to take account of, lifestyle. So what have we learned about managing lifestyle this year, and what things can we do to improve on the systems and routines that this athlete has? So how do we capitalise on that, given that he travels a lot? He's got a demanding, stressful job that takes a lot of hours, and how do we use his available time in the most effective way, and how do we deal with the travel time? It's international travel, sometimes for a week at a time, and as a consequence it's difficult to have a normal training routine. Sometimes it's very long hours, and therefore what we've done is we try and capitalise on the time, the home time, build volume, be consistent, do all the good things that we can to build fitness, and use the times, the travel times, although they're not perfect recovery times, they can be recovery blocks, and use them as maintenance periods and damage limitation during those trips. So doing as much training as sensible as possible. It's difficult when you're cycling because you don't always have a good hotel bike, but hotel gyms are pretty good nowadays. And he's been doing a bit of running to maintain aerobic fitness. So rather than having a fixed 2 weeks on, 1 week off, or 3 weeks on, 1 week off type structure, we have we use the travel to create a framework and train hard when he's at home, when he's commuting to the office. The commute's a really effective way of building fitness. It can be for anybody. If you've got a commute that you can use to build fitness, it's basically free time. You're forced to do it. It's a perfect way to have a routine, because it's just, you can build a routine around things you're doing normally, and that's always a lot easier. And then travel time is these maintenance periods. And of course there's family time to fit in as well. So there's a very busy athlete, and therefore we've developed systems that work with his lifestyle and build on things that he's actually doing already. He has to work hard, obviously, to fit things in, but he does it very effectively, and he's a high level performer. So the message here is not you should do this to get fit for 2025. The message here is, if you follow this process of reviewing your past seasons, if you've got years of cycling history or years of running history or years of history in sport that you can draw on to inform next year, then draw on that, learn from that, and make some small changes this year so that you do a better job of your training and perform better. And remember that you can't make these giant changes. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to be able to improve like 50% or double my FTP in a year. I realise I'm exaggerating a bit. But changes are very small. After you've put a lot of time in and you've got a strong history of training and in sport, changes are quite small. And week on week, they're very small. but they are significant. So what you're trying to do is look for manageable but meaningful changes, and building on very small changes to compound into quite big changes. And it's the consistently showing up, putting the work in, that makes the difference, and doing it in an intelligent way so that you structure your season to get the most out of yourself. Don't get knocked back by disruptions in your schedule or illnesses and things like that. Keep working and moving forward, and use all the time you've got available. And another couple of things that we're starting to work on with this particular athlete is to be a bit more focused on nutrition. Nutrition is quite difficult when you're travelling. Nutrition and hydration can be very difficult when you're travelling, because you don't really have control of your diet. You're out of a routine. If you're changing time zones, it can be quite difficult to be hungry at the right times. And of course, you've got social commitments. If you're working with colleagues, you've got meetings and things that might happen over meals. And then he's going to introduce strength training into the plan, which is actually quite good, because hotel gyms being quite good nowadays means that we could perhaps weight training towards strength training during travel times, back off cycling a bit, and then when he's back he can capitalise on the strength gains and work on the cycling. So there can be some benefits in the travel and using it in an intelligent way if you can find the time during an extremely busy schedule. Anyway, I hope this is useful. Rely on your history, learn from your history, make some small changes. Don't look for massive gains, look for small gains. Aim to do a bit better next year, and then a bit better the next year, and you'll be really surprised at how much you improve and how well you perform. As usual, get in touch if we can help you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.